All right. Looks like we had a little bit of a technical difficulty here, but we finally got everything up on par. So I want to welcome. Unfortunately, we were supposed to schedule this on Wednesday, but we had a little bit of a scare. I was about to go down range, but luckily I ended up getting pulled from that. But we're still leaving. I don't know if you just saw the news today. So they are going to be sending the 2,000 troops that the Secretary of Defense talked about. So that's still going to be happening across wherever in the Middle East. We don't know, but ultimately they're going to be beefing up the air defense systems based off of what Secretary of Defense Austin talked about today on the news. So interested to see what happens with that whole madness. It looks like you got out of the military at a good time because you probably on one of the
Yeah,
ships right now that are on there. So let's go ahead and open it up. Just introduce yourself, and then we'll roll right into things.
sure. First things first, I appreciate you for having me. Obviously, I'll introduce myself to everyone. My name is Javaun King. I used to be in the military. I was in the Navy for 12 years, and something that you had mentioned about the ship that is out there currently, I was on that ship, and the USS Gerald Ford, I was on that ship, and I'm no longer on that ship. I'm not on anyone's ship anymore. Although I was thankful for the time that I was on someone's ship, no more will I be on anyone's ship. I was in the Navy for 12 years. I was on 2 different carriers. And then I did a short tour, and then I decided to go on and get out of the military. And now here I am about 11 months, yeah, 10 or 11 months into my military transition.
So, when you were transitioning, what in the Navy did you have any opportunities for skill bridge? Were you able to do anything? So, draw the picture when you were able to achieve your PMP and then your transition. Was that something that you achieved while still in the military, or was it post military?
Sure. When I was in the military, I didn't know what a PMP was. I didn't know what project manager was. I didn't know what agile was. I didn't know all these different methodologies. I had no idea what any of that meant. And actually, the reason that I got even involved into project management was somebody that I knew prior who was a civilian. They told me, they're like, "Hey, you would probably be a good project manager." And I was just like, "What's project management?" And they're like, "Well, you manage projects. So you just make sure that they don't fall apart." I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. All right, that's cool." So I started doing some research and I was like, "Yeah, I think I want to do this project management thing." And so at the time I decided that I wanted to do this thing, I was a second class, I was the E5. And then a couple months later, I made first class, which I was so happy about. But then a couple months later, I looked around and I was the only first class around. So I knew the moment I knew that I was the only first class around, I knew I was not gonna be able to do skill bridge, which I was not able to do skill bridge, but I was able to do my 35 hours right before I left the
Mhm.
military.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I actually got out that I actually started studying, like, really intensively, and when I actually sat for my test was all post-military.
Okay. Yeah. So you are pretty much in a pipeline to get you from the military into a skill bridge and then ultimately into a job. So it's all your efforts have been mainly outside of the military, and that's where you're at right now and open to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I just like I said, I didn't even know, like, project management because the type of job I did, we didn't have any of that. Like, the only thing relative was that, like, we like some leadership, like, here and there, but it was no, like, set in stone, "Hey, you 3 people are gonna go and, you're gonna do project management related stuff." I had a small run-in with I think we had yellow belt. I think we had yellow belt, and then we had this thing called CPI, continuous process improvement. And that was, like, the only thing that I didn't even know that was project management back then. This was way before I ever heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
That was it. There was no clear process of, "Hey, you guys do project management, think about getting your CAPM or your PMP, and then when you get out, you can use it." There was nothing like that.
Now in the Navy, did they require you to have your Cat PM first, or were they able to allow? I guess you did it all. You did so you paid out of pocket then. Out of
I did, yeah.
okay, okay. So you didn't even
Yeah.
get to use any kind of because I know in the Navy they have weird rules when it comes to training versus actual paying for certification. So I guess you didn't even have that opportunity to utilize any of that there.
Yeah, so we have Navy Cool,
Yeah.
which Navy Cool, they'll pay for certification courses. But the thing with Navy Cool is the very first line of defense is it has to be in line with your job.
Mm,
In the event that it's not in line with your job, you can still do it, but
yep.
then that's where you start to see the red tape. Like, I wanted to do, like, an IT related thing, but so they were like, "All right, so you will pay for this, but you basically you have to prove to us
That you're
that
gonna do that job.
you're gonna pass this, so we're
Oh,
just
okay.
not wasting our dollars just
Yeah.
because, you said you wanted to take this course." Because even when you submit for Navy Cool, you have to get it approved, and all these people they're gonna ask you all these questions. How do you know you're gonna pass this? What do you know about all this? And so I didn't get even too far, but once I talked with the person on the phone about that, I saw the stars align. I was like, "Oh, okay, this is gonna be a thing." So I didn't even do that. So when I went to take my PMP, I did my 35 hours actually through O2O,
Okay.
Onward Honor Opportunity. So I did my
Yep.
35 hours with them. And their rule is, hey, come to with us, do 35 hours. And what they require is they require for you to take the full length exam, 180 questions, and you have to pass it with an 80% or above 3 times
Oh,
before they do,
the voucher.
yeah, the voucher. And I was just like, "Oh, there's no way. There's no way I'm gonna sit for this exam 3 times and get it."
Wait,
So
so they
I
wanted
did
you
it.
to do the full exam 3 times at a 80%
Yeah.
and above to get the voucher? That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yes,
That's a
and I
lot.
yes, it is because that's the same amount of questions are that is an advancement exam. So it's like taking 3 advancement exams
Yeah.
and getting an 80% or above. So I didn't even when I went to do my PMP, I never did that. I never did.
Yeah.
I didn't even use that as a resource to prepare myself.
So what did you do for your studying and everything then for your PMP?
Sure, I went on Reddit, which
Yep.
I think that's where you and I
Yeah.
we but before even that, I went on Reddit and everyone was just like, "Hey, take this Udemy course
Mhm.
by on I think it's on,"
Andrew Remo
and I didn't even finish his entire course because I had already had my 35 hours. So I didn't, but he did a good job of explaining stuff. And then also at that same time, I'm in the group on Facebook with Act Now Education.
Yep.
And so at that time, they were doing like a PMP intensive. And I was just like, okay, yeah, no, I need to be in this. So I went and it was like 4 or 5 weeks. I went in that and I was studying and they're like, hey, look, if you guys want to pass this, you got to do 1,000 practice questions. Doesn't matter where they're from, do 1,000 practice questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went in there and I did the 5 weeks. And so I did the practice question, but I also, at the same time, I used PMI Study Hall,
Yep.
which that's a pretty good resource, and that kinda pretty much aligns with the exam pretty much everyone says. So everyone on Reddit was just like, "Hey, once you get a 60 and 70% on study hall, you're ready."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. Did the
Exactly.
4
That's
weeks.
exactly what I did.
Yep. When I was between act and I was probably right around 60s, and I went and I took the test. I passed it the first time. I got above target, and I passed it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's like I said, a lot of people I do see the value in the boot camps that the military has as far as Vesta PM, PM Pro learning and everybody else. I do
Mhm.
see the value that it can bring to people, but if you don't have the funding, the resources, it's a little hard to do.
Mhm.
Certainly in your situation since you're already out. For me, I was able to take credential assistance and
Mhm.
utilize that into or what we call in the Army cool. I was able
Yeah.
to take that and utilize that funding in order for us to be able to get the voucher and get it paid for. But I already started studying prior to going into the exam or going to the boot camp. So I was well ahead with my classmates. I was well ahead compared to everybody else. Now I
Right.
just had one of my classmates because we have a signal group for PMP and one of them just passed CAPM and also a PMP just recently. So it's good progress, but like I said, it just depends on your availability, the funding, how much it's going to cost. Mainly, it's just a matter of just getting after it, and that's what I
Right.
was taught in the beginning was test early and test often. And really, there's only so much you can learn when it comes to whatever textbooks that are out there. Like I made a mistake by buying all these Pinbock books, and I was like,
Yeah.
why did I spend $80 on these stupid books? Then come to
Yeah.
find out the $150 membership that I got for PMI, it also provided me the PDF for the Pinbox 7. So I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, man, why did I buy these books?" But it's fine. It is what it is, and it was a lesson
Mhm.
learned, but I think going through your journey, going through my journey, it helps other people understand how to get because when you really think about PMP, you and I were in the same situation.
Mhm.
Back in May, I didn't know what PMP really I've done project
Yeah.
management, but I never really thought about going after PMP certification in terms of
Right.
my IT background. But then when I got a mentorship session back in March of this year, this retired CW5 warrant officer, Army warrant officer pretty much said, he looked at my profile and said, "Hey, you should really look into PMP." And that's where everything went into motion. And so here we are. Now I'm
Yeah.
ready. I don't know if you just saw, I just became the social media engagement chair for the PMI Austin chapter.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I can suggest for you is the PMI chapters, wherever you're at in the Virginia area, join them, go to the events like you and I talked, because I think that will also open doors and opportunities for you. I don't know if you're that organization that you're part of a chapter, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm actually in the Washington DC chapter,
Okay.
and so I just started like getting involved and with it. So yeah, that's been something that's helped as well too. Because I feel like transitioning out of the military is this it's a one for one type of thing. There's
Yeah.
nothing else that you can compare it to.
No,
It's not like leaving one job and leaving another because you're not leaving
it's
a
a
job.
lifestyle.
Yeah, it literally it's a lifestyle. Like the person that I was when I was in the military, that person's dead. That person
Mhm.
is dead.
Yeah.
I am no longer that person. And it's just you have to for me, I had to accept it fast. That person was no longer I was no longer AB1 King. The day that I my EAOS hit, I was no longer AB1 King. I was Javaun King. And I had to I don't wanna say figure out how to be that person, but I just had to I had to come to grips with reality very
Yeah.
fast. I'm never gonna become that person again. That person I had a 12-year great run, and it was great, and it was phenomenal, but it came to an end.
Yeah.
And the day that it came to an end is the day that it ended.
And that was it. And
And
that was one of the things in one of my other podcasts was the one guy, John McConnell. When he said when he retired as a CW3, there was no red carpet, any confetti or anything else like that. It was it. That was it. That was the
yeah,
end. And
done. You're done.
so as I'm getting close to my 2-year retirement window and I reflect back on everything that I've done in the military, I do have to realize that I need to start making that transition. But then at the same time, though, too, how do I transition myself from being in a so constructed left and right limit military mindset to the civilian world? And that's why I've done on these freelancing jobs to help get me to that point. And so that's where I guess for you, what has been your struggles as far as when it comes to job interviews? And we'll go through the questions. And I know we're going a little bit off script, but I think this is a
Right.
great discussion because it gives people the opportunity to know Javaun King, who you are, rather
Right.
than we're going through some questions here. And I got a couple of comments in the section here. So, yeah, one guy wrote here, Michael wrote, "I'm not transitioning yet, but I can say that the PMI membership has started to prove very beneficial as I prepare for transition." And he's the guy that's stationed here with me at Fort Cavazos. And you and me, Mike, we need to link up still. He did reach out to the PMI chapter, and then eventually I finally was able to engage with him, even though I wasn't in the seat. But those are where you need to be able to build is your mentorship within the DCs. Here, we got another one here. We got another reply in here in the comments, but mainly in the DC area, you should be able to leverage your network.
Yeah.
You still have an active clearance or no?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
something I when I was leaving the military,
yeah.
I informed everyone. I was like, "You guys need to protect your clearance like a child."
Oh yeah, yeah,
Because the thing is, whether if it's just a secret or if it's a top secret, or if you got a poly, whatever it is, protect it as much as you can because that is something that's going to open up a lot of doors. So yeah, I kept my clearance. I had actually just done a reinvestigation like a year before I had gotten out, a year and a
yeah.
half. So I was fresh and I was happy about that. And I didn't even realize at the time when I was doing the reinvestigation that it was such a blessing that I was doing it when I was doing it.
Yeah, and that's what I for this here, I think what I can do for my network is tag some friends that are up in the Virginia and
Mhm.
DC area. after all said and done. And like I said, what I'll do, although too, is I'm going to compile this video for YouTube. So this is a literally a running resume, a video of you. So we'll go
Yeah.
ahead and roll into the questions. I know we got in 20 minutes already, 30 minutes into things here, but let's go ahead and go to the first question here. Could you share a specific example of a challenging project you managed and how you ensured it was successful completion? So something experienced outside of the PMP realm that you were able to successfully complete a project while in the Navy.
Sure. So there was a situation where I had just got to the ship. I was there for maybe about a year. What the situation was, we had to implement a new help desk slash trouble call desk program on the ship. And I had previous experience doing this from the ship that I was on before that. So the challenge with this, because this is a brand new platform, was getting everybody qualified. So basically what my task was is I had to develop a procedure, a test and board procedure to get all these personnel to write this standard for the test and board for these watch stations. And so the challenge with this is I encountered a lot of pushback when I was doing this. I wrote the test procedure, I wrote the board procedure, all these questions. I wrote like a combination of 100 different questions and answers. And I was just getting a lot of pushback from like senior leadership. And at the time, I was just like, man, they don't want me to succeed. They don't want it because it's me and it's not them. But I look back now and they were taking this opportunity to help me grow as a leader because I was just doing this task as just a regular task that I just had to, just something that I just had to do. But it was used so much as a learning lesson for me. And also they took this as an opportunity to really train me and developed me into a leader. And this is where my first like real leadership started is when I was in this position. It was everything had got approved, obviously has to go all the way up to the commanding officer. And at the time, I just had to explain to the chief engineer, the Chang, I had to explain to him like everything. He had a lot of questions. So this specific chief engineer, he was notorious for having a reputation of very much in your face, being he was a chief engineer. He was a very smart person. He was a commander. But he was a nuke. He would ask me questions. I had to give him, sometimes he required textbook answers. Sometimes he didn't. So it was an interesting situation. Everything got approved. Captain signed off on it. And it's a procedure that, to my knowledge, is still being used to this day.
Nice. Yeah, and it's funny when you talk about Navy things. It's hard for me to. Where it's almost like a second. It's like a second language when Army and Navy, how we have different lingo and different terms of knowledge. That's also, and I think that's really where it comes down to is translating your experience. And that's one thing in the military people don't realize that anything you do in the military, whether it's like a PT test or you're
Mhm.
administering something as a senior enlisted or NCO, whatever the case may be, officer, you doing a project, if it has a start and finish and it's not operational, it's a project. And that's where
Yes.
people don't
Yes.
realize how valuable we can become in any industry. And that's one thing, though, one gentleman talked to me about on one of the agile framework uh, groups on LinkedIn. He said he's not stringent to IT. He does IT, does construction, and he's agile, Scrum Master, PMP, whatever, certified, and he has all those credentials. But that was really the first person I've met that is able to pivot to different types of fields of industry. Because normally, most people that I meet with PMP are normally only contained by one industry. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next question here. So the next one, how do you apply your project management PMP certification to your day-to-day work as a project manager? Or I guess we could say, what would you do? How would you apply this? And I know that I still need to link up with the freelance ordeal, but taking your PMP certification, how would you provide that to an organization?
Sure. Yeah. So how I've taken my PMP journey and how I apply it in my day to day life. So in my day to day role, I basically apply the PMP methodology. Something I learned about project management and specifically about the PMP is you have to have constant pressure. I had to have constant pressure while I was studying. And what I do is so I had to ensure all the tasks that I was doing were completed before moving on to the next one. because the PMP I realize is a very specific test and certification because it's just not one of those where you can half focus on it and you can just hope you pass. Because I don't believe it was my knowledge that allowed me to pass the certification, but I simply believe it is the mindset of the project manager that allowed me to pass it right. It's not just showing up and hopefully we got everything together. But the mindset of the project manager is saying, no, hey, I know my requirements are good. I already communicated with my stakeholders. We're already handling procurement. That's already taken care of. My point of contact is this person. We already have a plan in place for quality assurance. And then we already know what our next steps are. And it's funny when I'm talking to somebody job related, I always make sure I get next steps, no matter what it is. And even not that's not job related, even stuff at church. I'm like, all right, hey, Pastor, so what are our next steps with this? And the PMP has allowed me to do that because it's if you have an actionable item after, say, you and I, we have an actionable item after this, we're gonna follow up with that. We're gonna do that. These are additional tasks that we have to get done. And it's demonstrating and making these communications clear where you're doing and it's important that a project manager knows how to do that because the PIP box specifically says that the success of a project is the responsibility of a project manager. Like it's not the stakeholders, it's not the project team. It is the project manager who's responsible for the success of the project. And it's the mindset. I personally believe it is the mindset of a project manager that that makes projects successful or not successful. It's not that if you're smart or you got this certification, or your stakeholders are with you or they're against you, or if you have a strong matrix or a weak matrix, or you have all these risks. I firmly believe it is the mindset of a project manager that allows him or her, to complete a project successfully because there's just a certain way that you have to think in order to make sure that something is successful, a project is successful. And the military does a great job of preparing us for that. And I think I had an aha moment when the two just clicked and they just went together.
Yeah, and that's really when it comes down to it is just the framework. And I always tell people when I took PMP, as far as studying wise, it was almost like being brainwashed. And now that I'm doing it, and it's funny because I'm on a new project right now with this one company. I'm doing 3 projects plus this other I'm actually probably doing right now 5 projects.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot. Taking everything that we learned, but then also using my personal experience from the past, whatever I'd done in the 18 years in the army, and then
Mhm.
being able to collaborate those systems that we all had, whether what you had in the Navy, what I've had in the Army, and putting those into motion. And that's one of the things though that I wish that the military would be a little more proactive, and the Army particularly when it comes to planning, because I think we miss the mark a lot when it comes to the
Mhm.
Army. Just in case this instance right now with this whole Israel thing, there's a lot of things that I could see that could help us become a better fighting force function when it comes to the planning side of the house of how do we
Mhm.
get certainly in a initiating stage. And I get it, this terms of what's happening right now, it just popped off. And now we're pretty much in going from initiating planning right into execution within a week. But I think
Right.
there are deliberate steps that we should put in place. And what happens in the army, we use MDMP, military process development program, and it's okay. But I think we could do better and using some of the PMI construct to be able to get everything throughout the door. And that way it provides a better framework for everybody across the board. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to move to, let me see here. So, all right. As a military veteran, how's your background influenced your approach to project management and leadership? So that's why I wanted to mention this situation with what's happening right now and how we're getting people out the door in response to Israel and Hamas. But from your experience, think of something that you've done in the Navy and then applying the project management or PMP certification, how that could have assessed or assisted you in that.
Sure. Yeah. So being a veteran is interesting because as a veteran, you come equipped with a specific amount of skills that not the average person would have. Because one thing I've learned about the military community is we have an ability to operate in chaos. That is one of our skill sets. Even sometimes people don't even understand that is one of our skill sets. We can operate in chaos. And so as a veteran, I come into the mindset that not everything is always going to go your way, but you have to find some way, somehow, some way that come hell or high water, you have to figure out how to make it work. And that is something that at least I can attest that that's been drilled into my head at least that, hey, I know this didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go, but we still have to make it work. And that's just a requirement that we adhere to. And I think that we think that mindset is normal, but it is not normal that we can do that. And so it's influenced my way that I approach projects in leadership because not only that not it's not always going to go your way. You may be in a situation where you have a client or a stakeholder, they're just flat out, they're just a pain in the butt. But it doesn't matter if they're a pain in the butt. You still have to work with them and you still have to ensure that the project is successful. So it almost makes you look past all the things that you're dealing with. You have to say, okay, how do I still make this thing work? I know that we don't have the parts that we need. I've been a part of projects where, hey, we're missing 10 critical parts. Okay. How do we still make this successful and make sure we're still in compliance, that we're still doing everything that we're supposed to do? How do we still make this successful? What substitutions are we legally authorized to make? When I was in the world of 3M maintenance material management, I was doing that for a while. There was always a saying that workstation supervisor can substitute like tools because they have that authority. And so it's just thinking that, okay, all right, hey, I know I don't have this specific O-ring, but what O-ring can I get or what gasket can I get that still meets that same requirement to do that? Okay, I know that we're supposed to change out this union, and this tool isn't available. What tools are available that I can still use? Because when you're working on a job, whether it be mechanical, you're trying to change a valve, or you're trying to make a new garden, there are going to be tools at your disposal that you're going to want to use that may be best fit for the job. But sometimes you don't always have the tools that are best fit for the job for one reason or another. So you have to think and you have to get into that mindset of, okay, what is at my disposal that I can use to make sure that I can get this job done? And then once the job is done, okay, how do I make sure that I don't have to deal with that again? And that's where you come into the risk with the whole risk register on your risk mitigation plan, because as we're doing these projects and there's just some things you just don't think of. There's just some things that come up, whether you're in a waterfall methodology or you're in agile doesn't pertain to that. With and a waterfall, there are things that come up that you didn't even think of that were going to come up, but you still have to make sure that the project is going to become successful, because as a project manager, that is your responsibility to make sure that the stakeholders can say, thank you so much. This project was so great. You brought a lot of business value to us and we appreciate you so much. And we will continue to do business with you. And I believe that every veteran, as long as they're in some sort of type of leadership, has the ability to do that, because we are called to, and we were taught always to think outside the box. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. And that brings us right into our next question here is just, how would you explain your approach to risk management and how does it help mitigate potential issues in your project? Like you said in the Navy, how do you do, how do you assess certain risks based on conditions? Maybe in an instance to procurements that if you were to you're relying on things, and I don't know how it works on the ships, but I'm guessing when it comes to procuring parts or whatever the case may be, just explaining how do you approach risk management in terms of what you did in the Navy and then how that can be applied, of course, outside.
Sure. I can only speak from my experience of procurement, of how it works for us. I was on a carrier. I've never been on a small boy or anything like that. So how it works for us is every single time we are doing a maintenance action, we know every single thing that is required. We get an MRC, a maintenance requirement card, tells you all the tools you need, tells you all the parts, all the supplies that you're gonna need. And so you're gonna order those. Most divisions have what they call a never out list. And so that's going to consist of things that you always need to have no matter what. And these are things that if you don't have these, they're going to stop the ship from going out to sea. I know some of the things that we had for our division where there was a specific type of grease we always had to have because this grease was critical to this component. So we always had to make sure that this was what not only that we had it, but it was on board before we could even go out to sea. That every single work center, excuse me, had to have between 2 to 4 extra gallons before we could even go out to sea. It was one of the we have it in the Navy specifically, we had like a 72-hour, not a pre-deployment, but like a pre-underway check. And this was one of those things that we had to account. But when we talk about risk, usually there's a framework for following risk. So first you got to identify the risk. Again, this is assuming that the risk is brought up and what the risk is going to be. So first we got to identify the risk. Okay. All right. The risk is, and I'll just use it for example. Okay. We don't have enough rags. Okay. So that is our risk. How do we, next thing we want to do, we want to analyze this risk. All right. How much will this affect us? Will this stop us from launching aircraft? And I say launching aircraft because that was the job that I did. The next we want to prioritize. How important is this? And also when you prioritize this risk, you have to also understand what else does this risk affect? Okay, say we're running out of rags. So now us running out of rags means we can't clean the equipment. Maybe as well. Not saying we still can't clean it, but maybe as well. So maybe there's possible degradation in the equipment if we don't get to it pretty fast. But then after we'll prioritize it, we need to assign this risk to somebody. And when we assign this risk to somebody, this is going to allow us to they'll allow that person to be responsible for that specific risk. So then what we'll do, say we don't have a lot of rags. All right. So the supply department or the people in charge of supply division, obviously that was something that they would be in charge of. And hey, we don't have a lot of rags. Hey, can you figure out how we can get some more rags? Can you call this person? Maybe they have some. Can you do a hookup? Can you call in one of your favors? Because sometimes it's to that point where you need to cash in one of your favors. And then we want to respond to the risk or do risk mitigation. In the event that we can't get any more rags, what happens? What else can we use? Obviously, we have 4 catapults. I worked on the catapults. And I didn't say this earlier, so I was an ABE. And I can't see it in the comments, but for any Navy people, most will know what that means. But any non-Navy people what my job is I was in charge of the launching and the recovering of the aircraft on the carrier. And so there's inside of that, there's two different, there's the launching part and then there's the recovery part. So I was on the launching part. And so that comprised of the 4 catapults. So say in the event we don't have enough rags, okay, we have 4 catapults. So maybe we only operate 2 of them instead, which is totally normal. There's been plenty of times where we didn't operate all 4 because most of the time catapult 1 is full. I say full because that's where we park a lot of the aircraft. Okay, we're not going to use all 4. And most of the time it's actually 2 and 3, or it's 2 and 4, or it's 2, 3, and 4. Okay, we're not going to use all 4. So what we can transfer those parts, those rags to those other catapults so we can make sure that equipment is clean. And so that's just when you have the framework, it's best that you can follow the framework because I have realized from my own personal experiences that when you get outside of a proven framework, that's when things start to mess up. That's when people start to make mistakes. And that's what we want to avoid. And that's why the framework is in place.
It's a good response there. We got a couple of people commenting on here, and I had a message come in. I'll have to answer it afterwards. But no, I did that kind of explains that I didn't even know. I was going to ask you what you did in the Navy and
Yeah.
what that entailed, but like
Yeah.
I said, anything that consists of operations versus what a project is, that really comes down to, and you just literally you broke down, of course, even in a launch pad for an aircraft, that's a risk. You have to
Yeah.
take those considerations of what you could be able to provide and saying, okay, like in the Army, when we do a convoy, we have to create risk assessments based on vehicle movement in a combat zone, troops to contact, anything else that may come about, IEDs in the road, whatever the case may be. I guess in the Navy, you probably won't have to necessarily worry about a lot of those things there, but it
IEDs.
ultimately, yeah, it ultimately provides you the framework of that and understanding how that ultimately rolls. And let's go ahead. We'll move on to we're pushing an hour, so that's why I was going through a couple of the couple of the questions here because I know we opened up about 20 minutes into it, and I
Sure.
think that it really helped out laying out the guide of everything that we're talking about here. So we'll go one more question here, and then we'll look at the comments and then close up. So, can you provide an example of a situation where you had managed conflict within your project team or your team in general in the Navy, and how you resolved them? And so, really, what this highlights is, of course, is the people domain, and how do you go after people conflict, and what do you do in order for you to be able to take a situation, whether someone's right or wrong, as a project manager or as a NCO or a leader in E5, what did you do in order to mitigate that?
Sure. Yeah. So first thing I will say when it comes to conflict resolution and managing conflicts, I always tell people if you don't like to confront people or do conflict resolution, you should not be a project manager because that is going to be a huge responsibility on your part because people are going to disagree, stakeholders are going to disagree, project team members may even disagree from time to time, or there may be a mix. Maybe you could be in a situation where your stakeholder, and it could be a very important stakeholder, maybe doesn't like someone on the project team. And you have to swim through that and you have to be able to navigate through that. So I actually had a very specific situation. So I had a conflict between two extremely talented sailors that I had to manage. And the situation was, and I'm trying not to laugh, just even thinking about it now, is one sailor thought that the other sailor was out to get her. It was two women. And at first I was just like, you know what? Let me not do anything at first because even as a leader, we're always taught we want to help our people. But I also learned that when you are a leader raising and developing other leaders, sometimes you got to let them hit their head. Sometimes you got to let them figure it out, right? So what I did is I said to myself, okay, I know I have this conflict between these two individuals. It's not the point where they want to cut each other's neck. It's just just tension in the room, so it's manageable at this point. So what I did is I didn't do anything at first. I just let it play out, and so I did that for a little while. And the reason I did that is because if your parents are always come to your rescue, you're not ever gonna know to learn. Because if every single time when we're kids and our hand is gonna go touch a stove and our parents swat our hand away, we're not gonna understand how hot that stove is until we actually touch it. So what ended up happening, I ended up sitting them down. But before I did that, is I spoke to them each individually. Before I sat them in a room, my next step after not doing anything at all, just letting it play out, is I spoke to them each individually. And I was just like, hey, what's going on with this? Tell me what's going on with this. And one thing that I learned is when you're dealing with a conflict, it's a personal conflict. I have always been taught that you never just go in there and just start right at it. But you want to maybe break the ice a little bit. Hey, how's this project going? How's the work center going? Maybe even get a little personal. Hey, you still doing school? I know that you were doing school last semester. How's that? Then you could be like, hey, how's this going between you and this person? And the reason you want it that I've always believed that you do that and you want to do that is you want to break the ice and that gives them the ability to open up. Because if you go to somebody you were in a position I was in a position of leadership. I'm over these 30 individuals. I'm the only E6 there, and they're all E5s. Granted that it's just one pay grade different, but there still is that gap. There may be things maybe they initially wouldn't have said to me for one reason or another. So you just give them that opportunity just to open up. And so once I went to both of them and I realized, okay, that didn't fix it. So then the next thing that I realized I had to do was like, okay, I got to get these two in a room and I have to get them to talk to one another, and I have to get them to explain what is going on. What I did, I said, okay, hey, you come into my office and you come into my office. They're both there. And I also made sure I did is I had someone who was my immediate supervisor over me. So I was a first class, I was an E6. And so I reported to a senior chief, which that's an E8, right? And so he's just in there. And while he's sitting in there, we're dealing with this conflict, but he's watching me how I handle this conflict. So at the same time, I'm helping them. I'm being helped as they're being trained and I'm being sharpened that he's watching me to how I handle it, how I handle this as well. We sat down and I was just like, hey, I just want you guys to tell me what's the issue. Tell me your frustration with the situation at hand so we can get to the bottom of this. And so they did. And so we were in there probably for about 30 minutes, 30, 45 minutes. And they just explained what they didn't like about one another. And I was even when they were talking, I said, "You guys are we're all gonna sit down, we're all gonna talk, we're all gonna have a kumbaya moment because regardless of how you guys feel, you two need each other, even if you don't understand it or you don't see it yet. And by not working together, you are hurting not only the other person, but you're hurting yourself because the other individual has information and experiences maybe that you don't know and experiences that you have never dealt with." We all talked it out. It was heated at first. There was a lot of disagreements. There was a lot of you did this to me, and so I did that. And I was just like, good. I want you guys to say these frustrations. I want you guys to say these things because if we're gonna be a team, if we're gonna be an actual team and move together, because the nature of my job in the fleet, like actually like on the water on the ship, I need to know that I can depend on you because we're working on the flight deck together. It just takes a quick second and somebody could be dead. We talking about these very powerful systems with this hydraulic pressure and steam pressure. But once you press that fire button on the aircraft, it's going and there's nothing that can stop. There have been people that have lost their lives on the flight deck. We need to make sure that we can depend on one another, right? But even though this wasn't that situation, the mindset still carries. And I think that's the important thing about project management is the mindset is got to be what gets you through. And they did all this in a respectful manner and everything worked out. And so even still to this day, they're not best friends. And I told them, I said, guys, you don't need to be best friends.
Yeah.
You don't need to be drinking beers together every single day, but you need to have a good enough personal relationship where you guys, a professional relationship where you guys can discuss and where you guys aren't like, oh, I'm not going to go to that person for whatever reason. And they both made first class E6 and they're both doing really well from that. And they're great leaders to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I can imagine though being stuck on a ship and the personalities clashing and where
Mhm.
things become hostile just because of the environment that you're in and knowing that you're not going to go back to shore anytime soon and you're just going to have to deal with each other's personality.
Yeah.
So I can see you as a leader having to, do mediation between conflicts of personalities in order for a professional development to actually take hold and take place.
Yeah.
So, no, that's perfect, and I appreciate you giving your thoughts and your feedback. We're going on an hour now, so I don't wanna go overboard,
Sure.
but ultimately, what I wanna try to get out of this, like I said, I'm gonna start tagging people, but please share this. I'm gonna do some editing on YouTube for this and then also have it on YouTube, but ultimately, what I wanna be able to try to do is for you to showcase who you are, and
Right.
that goes for anybody, any veterans that you may be having trouble getting a job or getting your foot in the door. But what this
Mhm.
provides is, of course, for you, it provides a humanizing you as a person instead of
Right.
whatever someone sees on the piece of paper. And I think what I hope that will come out of value of this is that people will see the not just your PMP certification, but what you can provide to a company, organization, and a
Yeah.
team. And I think that will hopefully open doors for you to showcase you. Yes, you may not have PMP project management time under that certification, but given a chance, given your background in the Navy, the 12 years, that's
Right.
where you could be able to apply your skill sets. And I think that's where also we'll keep talking and we'll keep working, trying to get you integrated into the digital prodigy, and I'll tag her into this. And so that way she could see it, the CEO of the company. That way,
Right.
like I said, it gets you your name out there for one, and then
Mhm.
also your resume as a video. So did you have any closing comments at the moment?
No, I just want to say, one, I just appreciate the opportunity. You didn't have to do this, and I just appreciate your willingness. The even you're still in, so you got other stuff that you could be working on, that you could be doing. But I appreciate you and your family's time on a Sunday evening that you're willing to sit with me and talk for an hour and see how you can help me. I appreciate that you doing that as a person, and I know that, and I know you don't do it right for like favors or whatever, but I know something good will come your way because of that, just to show how good of a person that you are.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, we talked, like I said, on Reddit. I got booted
Yeah.
off Reddit, but either way, I
Oh, you
look at it.
did?
Yeah, I did because I got booted off the PMP because they said that it was self-promotion, but I was just trying
Oh,
to help people. So
wow.
yeah, but I guess but it's a blessing in disguise because I ended up taking a social media engagement role for my chapter,
Mhm.
so it works out, and I think it's a perfect fit for me. This is for me, this is social media engagement right here. I don't
Absolutely.
wanna I don't wanna say that I am a social media influencer. I want to say that I am a professional development influencer more than anything, is
Absolutely.
that I can help people shape their career or their path to where they're currently at. And I think ultimately, yeah, you might not have a strong IT background, but I think in due time you can learn some of the skill sets you need. And that's one of the things a lot of like my classmates that were all Air Force guys that I went through my boot camp with, they were not strong software guys because a lot of the stuff that PMP does teach in the agile framework tends to coincide with software development.
Yeah,
But
that's the
if you
OT.
don't know software, it's hard to apply that in other industries. But I think people are starting to get towards that and understanding how to apply an agile framework in any industry. And I think there was a video someone just posted about agile in a construction environment, which is crazy. But I
Okay.
guess if they're using it, they're
Oh,
using it.
you would definitely not think that agile would be in a construction environment,
Yeah.
because that seems like it's definitely more of a waterfall environment
Yeah.
because, hey, we're building a building. I think that as project management is progressing and developing, I think that agile is definitely more is gonna come to more of light. I think that even on the exam, like there was a bunch of agile questions on the
Oh,
exam, and I think it's people are getting away from, okay, this is how we've always done it type of
yeah,
mindset to now it's okay, let's try this. Let's see how this works.
yeah,
And I think that's the beauty. And I think that that's something that project management is should have been at, but I'm glad that it's at it now because it's the way we've always done it, maybe not always be the best way. And the only way to know that is by testing and figuring it out and doing these sprints and doing these iterations and having a hybrid environment. Oh wow, okay. I
yeah,
never knew to try
yeah,
that.
in the medical
Yeah.
world, yeah. So they are using it
Okay.
in agile in different environments, and I think that's great because, like I said, when you start breaking things into increments or iterations, you actually slow down by
Yeah.
not messing up. And that's like
And
for a project that I'm doing right now for this 3D software company out of Dallas. I've had to tell the developer to pump the brakes a little bit because he's working so far ahead right now that we are coming into a positive risk. It's good that he's going over, he's lot further ahead than what we expected, but at the same time, now we have these other domino effects of the website needed to be built to be able to talk to the desktop application. There's other technologies that we have to implement into the desktop software to push that data up to the website. So I had to tell the developer this last week. I'm like, hey, I appreciate you're putting 40 hours in a week, but man, we got to slow down because we're now working too far ahead where we're not catching up or we're not matching the other side, the marketing, the website, the
yeah.
3D implementation of the technology. Because I got four different people on my team for this one
Mhm.
project that I'm having to control, command and control and understanding, making sure that the time hacks meet what our deadline is, what our definition of done is. But
Yep.
otherwise, if we work too far ahead, we start messing up the sprint iterations of what we're right now. So right now I was only supposed to be in sprint 2. We're almost in almost done with sprint 3 right now. So
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
we're not burning through the budget, but we're burning through what and it's not bad that we're getting ahead, but we have to slow down in order to make sure we deliberately provide a software to the client and the platform that the client is trying to accomplish through what we're producing. And yeah, and it's important to be able to take those iterations and those segments and break things down so you can have an end goal, what that iteration may be, rather than just going through a work breakdown of whatever you're doing and then being able to finish that from task A to task B. Certainly, and I can see that in Michael's case is that in the medical field, some things can coincide, but a lot of the times now medical is becoming more technology savvy. It
Yeah.
really is technology savvy, but with modern medicine and all the things that probably happened right after COVID and what we're
Mhm.
currently doing now. So there's no telling, even with AI and how that's probably implemented into the medical field without breaking any HIPAA rules or a HIPAA violation. So
Right. Right.
yeah, just curious, but no, I appreciate your time and like I said, hopefully you'll get some leads out of this. That's what I want out of this is that You put your name out there, you put your face out there, you showcase who you are, what you've done in the Navy, and then what you can be able to provide for a organization on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, again, I just appreciate either way how it comes. I appreciate the opportunity again because you didn't have to do this, but you did, and I'm just appreciative of that. Bar none.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. And like I said, we'll be in touch. But once I get this all done on YouTube, we'll have that available. But by all means, you can share this to your network. I'm going to share this to my
Sure.
network. And that's what LinkedIn's all about, is to be able to
Yeah.
provide you a pivoting point in your career, or where you need to go, where you want to be. And I think that's where we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds great. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Have a good night.
All right. You as
All
well.
right. All right. Thanks.